And it's been another week. Today I thought we would talk about bursting through the ceiling.
Oh, okay.
It's one of my favorite visual effects that I've ever done. I'm just gonna break it down for you. It starts with getting 5 elements of raw footage.
You're gonna need an empty plate, one of Jonas standing, one of Jonas jumping, moving the chair, and moving the table. And then you're going to open up your project file. I called mine Blast Off. And here we have Jonas standing up. He disappears there because that's as much of the clip as I could use. So then I take this other aspect, it's like I sped it up so that he like jolts into a standing position. I masked him out using the pen tool, draw around, and you can isolate that part of the frame. If I solo that, you see that he is isolated from the background. If you change the settings on that mask, you can change the feathering, the hard edge around him. So if you turn the feathering off entirely, he's got just this like paper doll, see how cut out he is. But if you push the feathering, it really softens the edges. It looks like he's a little more part of the frame. And especially since he's moving really fast at this point, his edges would not be very crisp at all. So then I freeze framed him in that position and then went into the position settings and the transform settings of the clip, and I just moved him upward. When you're changing his position there, you can kind of see the numbers change. I'm just moving him up in the frame, dragging him upward. You can see the position dots right there. You can only really sell the idea of the motion if you have motion blur turned on right there. See? It takes the position that you are moving it and extrapolates out the motion blur from the movement of you repositioning him. If you don't have the motion blur turned on, look, it just looks awful. Motion blur on, boom. Oh man, looks like he's moving. But since I isolate him right there, we lose the shadow behind him. So we need to add a shadow so that it looks like he's still a part of the same scene. We do that with this shadow layer right here. That's the one I already created. You can see it move. Why don't we go ahead and make a new one just so I can show you how that's done real quick. We're gonna go up and we are going to take a layer, new, solid. Gonna open that up, pull it to the blacks. Okay, let's rename it so we know exactly what we're dealing with here. Super amazing shadow, perfect. Grab the pen tool, trace out whatever. Shadows are non-specific, as I've previously stated in another update. And then you gotta go into the settings of this super amazing shadow. Go into the mask settings, and then you're gonna edge feather it out so that it doesn't look, again, like a paper doll cutout. You can make it super shapeless or just give it a little bit of structure, but let it fade away like a shadow does. And we're gonna go into the opacity within the transform and pull it down so that it's very transparent. And then you're gonna animate it so that it moves as it progresses. Now, you don't have to animate every single frame with a shadow. You can do a couple frames, and much like with motion blur, it'll work out what the motion is between those 2 frames. So you can see, it does a smooth motion. We'll do 4 frames, just grab it, pull it aside, see what we're dealing with, and you watch as it over 4 frames, it moves out to that position that you made. So you just move it to kind of shadow Jonas, and then you've got a Jonas shadow. Now we're going to isolate Elston and Carl in their own portion of the frame using another mask and just edge feathering it out. Because I'm using a series of clips for Jonas bursting through the ceiling, and they were in that same footage, so you could see them moving around. By isolating them and putting that layer above the other layers, and then their motion will remain smooth no matter what clips are underneath it. Now let's ruin the ceiling of the apartment we're renting. Now I've told you guys about Action Essentials before. It's a downloadable pack of a variety of elements made by a company called videocopilot.net that also has a bunch of tutorials that taught me all this stuff. And you just take these elements and you can drop them on top of the frame to create things in the foreground. Like you can have smoke charges or blasts of water shoot up into frame. I use a lot of sparks. I use a lot of smoke. So these are some of the sparks we're going to end up using. The hole in the ceiling is just a bunch of these elements layered together and positioned in frame. So for example, there's this element here called Big Hole. It's just a texture. If I drop it on top of the frame, I can change the blending mode to whatever I want. If I change it to darken, you see it kind of is still present, but if I change it to linear light, boom, nailed it. And then these other elements right here blend with it. So a wood hole makes it look like there's a little more wood in there. And then I just kind of masked out one section of it so that it kind of blends. If I turn the mask off, you can see that olive wood hole is in there. and then subtract so that I just have an element of wood. If I turn on a second blend of big hole and then ground crack, there. Now we have a pretty decent hole in the ceiling. And now we're gonna just need a bunch of elements to drop on top of the hole to kind of blend the idea that Jonas has burst through the ceiling. We'll turn some of them off, get an idea of what they all do. You can watch them kind of disappear as I turn them off. Cork hits, good for a lot of like particles in the air. Powder hit, yeah, okay. So if you just watch just the powder hit, oh, got some debris in there. There you are. Okay, you just watch the powder hit. That's just one single element. Get some good sparks for the burst, and then a bunch of powder flying in the air. If I turn on these cork hits, those all hit at the same time. Now we're getting a lot more debris. You see there's more particles in the air. That's just with those top layers, just those initial hits from the cork hits and the powder hits. And now I'll turn those off. This is just the debris falling from the hole turned on. Turn that off, and this is just the debris landing. You can see it scattering on the floor and chair. And then this one is a little harder to see. It's kind of atmospheric smoke that appears just masked in right here. And you can kind of see it creeping over them, and in the doorway on the left, you can kind of see the smoke appearing. Hold on, I'm gonna actually just turn up the opacity. So that's what it looks like when you really turn it up. But I keep it down real low because it's just some atmospheric smoke. Kind of helps blend everything together. And we'll turn them all on. There we go. You can kind of see all of the elements coming together. And then with the chair, first you have to time remap it. So I went in and I grabbed the time remap so that it jolts upward really fast and then kind of falls back down in a regular type of motion. And then just mask it out and keyframe it. The dots move with the chair. I'm no longer in there. I masked out my feet as well. And let's see it clean. Nice. It's the same thing with the table. So with the table, you go in and you just gotta time remap it so that it jolts away from the chair. I didn't do enough of a fast push right at the beginning. However, it wasn't fast enough to get motion blur going in the first place. So there you see it looks blurry. That's actually a directional blur layer added. Looks really clear without it. Does not look like it's naturally moving. So I put it between these two time remaps. Turn on the directional blur and you see that blur? There we go. Now it looks like it's moving faster. And then we do 3 masks, 2 subtraction masks to get rid of the inside of the table so that the background matches. That's the background. See, it's blurring because it's got directional blur. Got to get that out of there so the background's not blurring. Put it on top, everything together. Chair moves, table moves, looking pretty good. But there is another thing that is going to help sell the effect, and that is pre-composing it. So you grab all of the layers, go up to layer, pre-compose, all layers I usually call it, and that pulls it all into one single layer. So if you click over here, all of those layers are just one layer. And that you can still position and add motion blur to. So in transform, you can go into position and move it around. And then if you're gonna keyframe those, you reposition it every frame and add a new keyframe so that the image shakes around really fast. Makes it feel like Jonah's bursting up off the floor, shook the camera really hard. But then if you go and turn on the motion blur that we've been talking so much about, for every keyframe, it really blurs the frame, making it feel super dynamic and like the camera's actually shaking. The fact that everything blurs really sells the fact that it's all part of the same frame. But now we can see the edges of the frame because we moved it all around. Just go down to scale, pop it up to 105. There we go. Now when we play it back, we won't be able to see any of the edges. It's not playing back in real time, but you can see that all of the elements are together and the camera shake really adds just the tiny bit of realism that ties it all together.
Okay, and that's how it all came together, and I love it. I finally got to see myself fly, which is great. Other things that have happened this week. We recorded 2 commentary tracks with Carlin for the DVDs. I'm re-exporting all of the episodes, and I'm actually probably going to do a quick color correction run, re-upload the full episodes to our website, because when I went through and made the under 13 minute 9-episode recap, I color corrected just those segments, and things looked a lot better than they did back in the day because I didn't know as much about color correction as I do now. Speaking of that, the episode parts that went up on YouTube, they weren't the color correction that I had done. I didn't know this at the time, but exporting out of Final Cut Pro in this one certain way kind of warped the colors. Boosted the contrast a little bit, pulled up the yellows and the reds, so the episode parts that went up, that everybody's watched, are not the correct color correction, and I went crazy almost immediately. But they had started being viewed, and comments, and I don't want to lose the views in the comments. So what I did is I just went into YouTube's video editor and I just pulled the saturation down so that it wasn't so red and yellow and ugly, because I thought it looked really ugly. Then I found a way to correctly export the color correction that I spent 2 weeks doing on episode 10. So the full episode 10 is now up on the Platoon of Power Squadron website, and that is the actual color correction. I know a lot of people won't care, but I cared a lot. And if I wasn't so tired and overwhelmed by everything leading up to the premiere, I probably would have noticed that the color correction wasn't correct before putting it up on YouTube in parts. But anyway, the actual intended color correction is up on YouTube now. It's just unlisted currently. I'm also thinking about, once I have all of those kind of remastered, recolor corrected episodes, the full episodes, of actually just making them public, even though the view counts will be off. Like, they won't be impressive view counts because everybody watched them in parts. But like, just making a playlist of that available on YouTube. We'll just call it like a remastered playlist or something like that. As remastered as it gets. Because if just color correction ain't gonna fix it, I'm not gonna go back in and like start redoing visual effects or anything. Because it's time for this project to be put to bed. I can spend a week doing color correction on all the episodes, like just touch-ups here and there. But beyond that, I don't think it's worth it. Anyway, that's what's going on this week, you guys. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial of that. We're going to be talking more about the making of episode 10 over the coming weeks, because there's a lot to talk about. I learned a lot, and there's a lot of complicated stuff. I think next week we're going to start talking about the alley. That might not be a one-week situation. There's a lot to say about the 9 nights we spent in the alley in episode 10. I hope you guys have a good one. Here is the full episode 10, the 59-minute file that you can watch all in one go without it breaking up at all. That's color corrected correctly. This is the latest Rob Scallon video that I edited. I have been editing his videos, and it's a lot of fun. That's the Pops logo. I hope you guys have a good week, and I will see you next time.